Imagine a household with only a few small plots of land. The harvest is modest. The family is not starving, but there is never much left after food, rent, taxes, tools, repairs, and unexpected illness. One son can read better than most boys in the village. Someone tells the family that if he keeps studying, he may one day enter the examination hall. And if he succeeds, perhaps the future of the household will be different. So the family makes a difficult choice. They delay buying a new farm animal. They wear old clothes for another year. They save money for paper, brushes, books, a teacher, and the cost of traveling to examinations. For years, one person studies while everyone else carries more of the family's work. This is the familiar image many people have of Imperial China. A poor student studies hard, passes the examination, becomes an official, and changes the fate of his entire family. But history is more complicated. The real question is not whether the examination system offered opportunity. It did. The real question is how many people could actually reach that opportunity, how expensive the journey was, and whether passing an examination truly guaranteed a stable future. Did the imperial examination really help ordinary people rise? The answer is not simply yes or no. It did open a path that had not existed in the same form before. It allowed some people without famous family backgrounds to gain education, credentials, reputation, and sometimes official positions. But it did not erase the importance of money, books, teachers, family support, local connections, and time. The door was real, but it stood at the top of a long staircase. To understand this, we first need to understand what humble origins meant in historical China. Today, when people hear poor family, they may imagine a household with almost nothing, no land, no savings, no books, no security. But in the history of the imperial examination, a person described as coming from a humble or ordinary family did not always belong to the very poorest group in society. Often, it meant that the family had no famous officials, no powerful lineage, and no long tradition of high office. Such a family might still own some land. It might have relatives who could help. It might live in a region where schools, books, tutors, and local study networks were available. It might already have a tradition of literacy, even if it had never produced a high-ranking official. That is very different from a household where every working hand is needed just to keep food on the table. For families with almost no spare resources, the first obstacle was not the examination itself. The first obstacle was surviving long enough to study. The imperial examination was not a magical shortcut from hardship to wealth. It was a system that connected education, family investment, personal endurance, and official recruitment. It gave some families a visible route upward, but it did not place everyone at the same starting line. Before examinations became central to official recruitment, family background often mattered even more. In different periods of Chinese history, people entered public life through recommendation, family reputation, military service, inherited privilege, local connections, and other routes. From the Sui and Tang periods onward, examinations gradually became part of the process of selecting officials. By the Song dynasty, examinations had become much more important in the recruitment of civil officials. By the Ming and Qing dynasties, the system had developed into a highly structured ladder of local, provincial, metropolitan, and palace examinations. This was a major change. A person could now, at least in theory, bring his learning and writing into a more standardized process. He did not need to depend entirely on a powerful patron speaking for him. That mattered. But standardized rules did not mean equal conditions. Inside the examination hall, Candidates might face similar questions and similar writing requirements. Outside of the examination hall, their lives were very different. Some students had fathers or uncles who could teach them. Some inherited books. Some had quiet rooms, lamps, tutors, and enough food to spend years preparing. Others had to farm, work in a shop, learn a trade, care for family members, or earn money before they could study. Some could fail once, twice, or even several times and continue. Others could afford only one serious attempt. So the examination hall may have placed answers on the same page, but every candidate had traveled a different road before reaching that page. The first thing many people forget is that literacy itself was expensive. Ancient China did not have a universal public education system that guaranteed every child years of free schooling. There were local schools, private teachers, academies, family schools, and clan-sponsored education. In some regions, these institutions were active and influential, but access depended heavily on place, family, money, and social networks. Studying required books. It required paper and brushes. It required a teacher or a knowledgeable elder. It required time to read, memorize, write, revise, and prepare. Most importantly, it required a family willing to let one person spend less time doing productive labor. For a household with land, savings, relatives, or small business, supporting one child's education was still costly, but the risk could be spread. For a household with fewer resources, supporting a student could mean placing a great deal of hope on one person. While he studied, who worked the fields? Who carried water? Who cared for younger children? Who handled illness, poor harvests, debts, rent, and daily expenses? Behind every examination essay was not only talent, there was also the question of whether a family could afford to keep supporting the writer. That is why the final list of successful candidates can be misleading. The list records the winners. It does not record all the people who studied for years and never passed. It does not show the candidates who stopped after one failure because the family could no longer afford the cost. It does not show the students who returned to farming, trade, or local work after spending much of their youth preparing for examinations. The system created opportunity, but it also created a long period of waiting, and waiting can be expensive. It is also important not to treat the imperial examination as one unchanging institution. The Tang, Song, Yuan, Ming, and Qing dynasties did not use exactly the same examination system. The content of the examinations changed. The role of family background changed. The value of different degrees changed. The number of available offices changed. The relationship between academic success and official appointment changed. So we should not imagine that every dynasty worked like the Ming and Qing periods. What we can say is that examinations became more important over time, especially in the selection of civil officials. But they were never the only path into public life, and they were never completely separate from family resources. During the Tang Dynasty, examinations already gave some people from outside the highest aristocratic families a way forward. But family reputation, social connections, and access to literary circles still mattered greatly. By the Song Dynasty, examination success became even more closely connected to official careers and social prestige. By the Ming and Qing periods, the system had become deeply woven into family life, local society, education, marriage, reputation, and long-term planning. At that stage, many families did not simply hope that one child would become an official. They built their lives around the possibility of academic success. They collected books. They hired teachers. They supported local schools. They encouraged sons to study. They hoped that even a lower-level degree might improve the family's standing. This is one reason the examination system became so powerful. It did not only select officials, it created a culture in which education itself became a major family strategy. But that culture also rewarded families that already had resources. Once a family had books, study habits, teachers, educated relatives, and knowledge of examination rules, the next generation started from a stronger position. A family that had produced one degree holder often had a better chance of producing another. The children grew up around books. They heard stories about past examinations. They knew where to find tutors. They understood the rhythms of registration, travel, study, and preparation. They had examples to follow. This is why the examination system did not simply replace old family privilege with pure individual ability. It weakened some older forms of inherited advantage, but it also helped create new families whose advantages were built around education, credentials, and local influence. A person did not need to come from a famous aristocratic clan to succeed, but having a family that understood the world of books and examinations could make an enormous difference. There was another hidden cost: travel. For many candidates, reaching an examination center was a journey in itself. They had to walk, travel by boat, rent transport, find lodging, buy food, carry documents, protect their belongings, and deal with illness or bad weather. Some candidates had relatives in the city. Some could travel with fellow students from the same district. Some had money for a safer and more comfortable journey. Others had to treat the trip as a high-risk gamble. Even without knowing the exact cost of every journey, the logic is clear. Any system that requires people to leave home for days or weeks will favor those who can afford to interrupt ordinary work. And even after success, the path was not always simple. Modern audiences often imagine that passing an imperial examination automatically turned a student into an official. That is not accurate. Different levels of success brought different kinds of status, qualification, prestige, and opportunity. A lower-level degree could give a person social recognition and a respected identity in local society. A provincial degree could bring greater prestige and broader opportunities. The highest degree created a stronger path into the official world. But academic success and a stable career were not always the same thing. The number of official positions was limited. The number of educated men and degree holders could grow. So many people gained reputation without immediately gaining office. Some became teachers. Some helped with local affairs. Some handled documents. Some worked in education, law, administration, or local organizations. Some became respected members of local society without entering the central government. That does not mean the degrees were useless. They mattered precisely because they changed status. A person with credentials could be treated differently in his community. His marriage prospects might improve. His family might gain greater respect. His children might have better access to education. His household might find it easier to deal with local authorities. The reward was not always a government salary. Sometimes the reward was social standing. Sometimes it was access. Sometimes it was a new sense of dignity. But even these gains were uneven. The examination system was more open than a system based only on inherited family rank. Yet it still depended on preparation, and preparation depended on resources. This is a pattern seen in many competitive systems. Whenever success requires years of preparation, preparation becomes valuable. Whenever success brings status, families will try to direct resources toward that success. The exam itself may be public, but the years before the exam are not equally available to everyone. This is why it is misleading to say that the imperial examination was either completely fair or completely closed. It was neither. It offered a real path to people who might otherwise have had little chance of entering the world of officials and educated elites. But it also placed heavy demands on families. It required literacy. It required time. It required money. It required emotional endurance. It required the ability to survive failure. The system did not simply test knowledge. It tested whether a household could continue investing in hope. For many students, the hardest part was not writing the final answer. It was reaching the moment when they were allowed to answer at all. A child had to survive. The family had to keep supporting his education. The household had to remain stable enough for him to continue studying. A famine, a flood, an illness, a death in the family, a debt, or a bad harvest could interrupt everything. Books could be sold. Study could end. The student could return to farming or seek another livelihood. We should not imagine that every scholar lived in the same hardship. Conditions varied widely between regions and families. But we should also not imagine that effort alone determined success. Effort mattered. Talent mattered. Discipline mattered. But the ability to keep making that effort often depended on how much support stood behind the student. This is why the examination system produced both hope and anxiety. Hope came from the fact that the path was not completely closed. A family without famous ancestors could still believe that study might create a different future. Anxiety came from the fact that success was rare, preparation was long, and failure could be painful. If a son had been treated as the family's academic hope for years, repeated failure was not only personal disappointment, it could feel like the loss of the family's investment. It could leave everyone asking whether they should continue. And once a family had invested many years, stopping could become difficult, not because the student had no other life available, but because the possibility of success still remained. As long as the door was not fully closed, people could keep believing that the next examination might be different. That belief was not foolish. It was based on something real. There were people from less prominent families who passed high-level examinations and entered official life. There were families whose social position improved over generations through education and academic credentials. The existence of these cases gave the system enormous power. It was not a fantasy, but a real possibility is not the same as an equal probability. The success of a few people does not mean that everyone had the same chance. This is why historians continue to debate how much the imperial examination truly changed social mobility. Some research shows that many successful candidates did not come directly from official families. That suggests the examination system created genuine openings. Other research reminds us that family background cannot be measured only by asking whether a candidate's father held office. A family may have no famous officials and still possess land, books, teachers, relatives, local standing, or long-term educational traditions. That family may be very different from one that cannot afford to send a child to study at all. The debate matters because social change is not one simple number. Did someone become an official? That is one result. Could his family afford to educate him? That is another. Did he gain local respect even without office? That is another. Could he give better opportunities to his children? That is another. The examination system changed all of these things in different ways. It changed the way families thought about education. It changed marriage strategies. It changed the value of books. It changed the role of teachers and academies. It changed the relationship between local communities and the larger state. And it changed what many people believed was possible. There's one more part of this story that is often overlooked. The formal examination system was mainly open to men. But a household's ability to support a student often depended on the labor of women and other family members. Someone had to manage the home, someone had to prepare food, someone had to care for children and elders. Someone had to take on work while the students studied. The story of the examination system is often told through candidates, examiners, and lists of successful names. But behind the desk, the lamp, and the travel money was often an entire household. The student may have sat for the examination alone, but he rarely carried the full cost alone. That is why the story of one scholar's success is often also the story of family sacrifice. The imperial examination system created one of the most durable ideas in Chinese history, that education could change the future of a family. That idea was powerful because it was partly true. Education did create opportunities. Credentials did change social status. Some families did rise over time, but the path was never simple. It did not erase differences in wealth, location, family support, or educational access. It did not guarantee that passing meant office. It did not protect people from failure, illness, disaster, or debt. It did not turn every hard-working student into a successful official. So did the imperial examination really help ordinary people change their fate? A more accurate answer is this. It gave some people from less prominent families a chance to improve their position. It offered a path that was more open than one based only on inherited family rank. But that path depended on conditions that many families could not easily secure. The system lowered some barriers, but it left others in place. It made it possible for education to matter, but it also made education a costly long-term investment. It made success imaginable, but it did not make success equally reachable. Return now to the family at the beginning. They sell part of a harvest to buy paper, brushes, books, and travel money. They are not foolish. They know the path is narrow. They know that most candidates will not reach the highest level, but they can see something their ancestors may not have seen as clearly before. A road, a difficult road, a road that may not lead to wealth, a road that may end in disappointment, but a road that offers the possibility that their family's future does not have to remain exactly the same. That is the complicated legacy of the imperial examination. It was not simply a myth. It was not simply a trap. It was a real door, built high above the ground. Some people walked through it and changed their lives. Many more remained on the steps. And behind them were books, lamps, debts, waiting, sacrifice.